We begin in the United States, where Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has held his first rally with his new running mate, JD Vance. It's also his first time back on the campaign trail after the assassination attempt at a rally last Saturday. Trump largely abandoned his message of unity in favor of attacking Democrats over their leadership struggles. Trump also used the attempt on his life to hit back at critics who say he's a threat to democracy.
But what they do is misinformation and disinformation, and they keep saying, he's a threat to democracy. I'm saying, what the hell did I do for democracy? Last week, I took a bullet for democracy. What did I do against democracy?
Trump's new running mate, Ohio Senator JD Vance, also gave a speech calling for a policy of America first.
You know, there's nothing radical about having a strong national security, that when we go to war, we punch and we punch hard, but being cautious and not trying to get America involved in every far-flung corner and conflict of the world. Sometimes, my friends, it just is none of our business, and we ought to stay out of it. That's not radical, it's common sense.
Chris Devine is an associate professor of political science at the University of Dayton, Ohio, and the author of Do Running Mates Matter? I asked him if Trump's running mate, JD Vance, matters.
JD Vance's selection does matter because it tells voters something about who Donald Trump is. Now, that might sound silly because we know Donald Trump very well, but what will his second term look like? 4 years beyond when he lost the last election, we had him disputing that election, not accepting the result, January 6th. Many things that he's done and said since then about policy, about what he would do in a second administration. So he tells us some important things, Vance does, about Trump. And I think the clearest signal we get is that, you know, he didn't choose someone with a lot of government experience. He didn't choose someone who seemed really well-placed to advance a legislative agenda, for example. I think what he does is ensure some loyalty to Donald Trump that Mike Pence didn't even provide to an extent that Trump was happy with. So I think voters might take that into consideration and might just stir up more concerns.
You say he hasn't got a lot of governing experience. Has that inexperience become a badge of honor for him?
I'd start with...
Yeah, you know, on the Republican side in particular, we've seen that claimed as a badge of experience. Donald Trump really, you know, embraced the fact that he didn't have political experience. He said he was a political outsider, and he wasn't the first Republican campaigning for the president to do that in recent years. So some do try that, but the fact is that voters do value experience. Now, JD Vance, let's be clear, he's my senator here in the state of Ohio, but only for the last year and a half. And he never held a political position prior to that. Compare it to some other people that Trump was considering, like Marco Rubio, who had been in the Senate for over a decade, or Doug Burgum, two-term governor from North Dakota. So I think voters are going to have concerns about it. Republican voters, not really. I think they like JD Vance's brand of politics by and large. But for anyone not already committed to Donald Trump, people are still making up their mind or could be persuaded, I think they'll have concerns just about his ability to do the job, perhaps among other things, for JD Vance.
Democrats have seized on some of Vance's past statements, including his quote, he doesn't care about what happens to Ukraine, and his support for a nationwide abortion ban. How aligned are his views in general with Donald Trump's?
Good question. Some of it depends on where we are at the moment. Donald Trump's positions have changed somewhat on what he would support in terms of abortion. He's embraced this position recently, as has the Republican Party, by his request, basically, to say that they do not support any national policy on this. It's just totally up to the states, which was the effect, in fact, of overturning Roe versus Wade. It wasn't to somehow ban abortion. It was just to allow states to choose that, but Congress could step in and set its own ban, which has been discussed possibly around 15 weeks, essentially. So J.D. Vance had a position before that he's changing now. He's in a different place, basically, with Donald Trump. And I should point out, in fairness, it's very common for a vice presidential candidate not to be perfectly aligned with a presidential candidate and have to make some changes. Some can be pretty egregious, but that's kind of expected, that they'll line themselves up with the policies of the presidential candidate. In this case, though, it only could support some of Democrats' arguments against Donald Trump to say that he picked someone who had supported a national ban, even if that's not where Vance says that he is at this moment.
Let's talk about the current VP, Kamala Harris. She's maintaining loyalty to Joe Biden when many are calling for him to step down. What are her achievements as vice president?
It's always hard to gauge the achievements of a vice president because so much of that depends on what opportunities they're given by the president. So Mike Pence, for example, was he an effective vice president? Well, Donald Trump didn't let him do a lot of things. There's some different narratives about Kamala Harris and the job she's done. Some people have been very critical. Others who defend her say that she's been given some tough assignments, that she was asked to deal with immigration, for example, which is a particularly troublesome issue in the United States for Joe Biden and really for any president. So, you know, she's talked a lot about abortion, for example, in more recent times, especially since Dobbs. So she has some policies that are more appealing to the general public, at least based on where polling is. But she's had some others, especially early on, that I think helped to define her vice presidency, that have had a lasting effect, where it just didn't really set her up well for success. We could still have a separate discussion about whether she's handled the opportunity she's had well. And I think for many, she's been underwhelming in certain ways. But it's hard to say what exactly she achieved because the vice president always following the lead of the president.
Great to have you on. Thanks for your analysis. That was Chris Devine, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Dayton, Ohio.
Thank you very much.